On today's episode, I sit down with Rachel Cellinese, art director and climate designer, to discuss the importance of collaboration and community resilience in taking climate action. Rachel shares her extensive background in entertainment design and her work as a chapter leader for the Los Angeles Climate Designers chapter. Our conversation explores how her work in entertainment design has shifted from promoting media consumption to encouraging active participation in addressing our climate emergency. We brainstorm on how designers can create for an uncertain future by fostering collaboration over consumption, utilizing open source tools, and integrating community needs. We also discussed concepts around community resiliency, design systems, and leveraging local libraries as educational hubs in creating a holistic approach to design and sustainability. Enjoy the episode. Hey, Rachel, how's it going?
Hi, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. First off, I'm excited to get into this. I know this is going to be a topic that you have lots to share. But before we dive into the Thinknado process, I would love for you to share a bit about yourself so our listeners can get a sense of who you are.
My name is Rachel Cellinese. I've lived in Los Angeles for almost half my life at this point. My background's been in the entertainment industry, guiding ideas for all things entertainment marketing, from visual storytelling of key art posters for film or campaign strategy for episodic series and brands, to music albums, immersive experiences, conceptual pitch decks. I've done it all.
Great. And so you've been working with climate designers from more or less the beginning. What's your role within the organization?
Since the beginning of 2020, our first event was scheduled for March 2020. I've co-led the Climate Designers LA chapter. We've hosted events gathering designers and creative professionals from all industries and partnering with local organizations to connect creatives engaged in climate action and build our community networks. I'm also a member of our Climate Designers team building team, and I've advised programming and workshops for Project Blue Sky last year and our virtual summit Climate Designers Party program in 2021.
Yeah, you've been a key volunteer with the organization for so long. Thank you for all what you've done. So a question we ask each guest at the start of every episode is, how is climate action showing up in your work?
I think thanks to the last 5 years with climate designers and learning so much and engaging with so many different people that are doing incredible things, I've really reflected on how I've spent so much of my career getting people to Netflix and chill, designing to serve the attention economy, to get butts in seats, get them glued to their couches, tune in and zone out of the real world. So now I want to use those skills that I've developed to do the opposite, to get them to get up off of the couch, get out of their house, explore nature, and be a participant in their communities and engage in the world around them. My dream would be to have people love and discuss nature and the environment in the same ways that they talk about their favorite reality TV drama. So for the last couple of years too, my work has led to using all of my creativity, communication, and collaboration skills to work with nonprofits, arts and municipal organizations to program workshops and facilitate them, coming up with ideas, organizing in-person and virtual events, and collaborating with the community to support nature-based systems and regenerative ideas through the collision of art and science.
Beautiful. Love it. So much to unpack there. I think we might need to invite you back. The next few episodes of the podcast will focus on the theme of climate resiliency. We're going to be inviting some of our team members to unpack climate resiliency. One of the many ways to define climate resiliency is the ability of communities, ecosystems, and infrastructure to anticipate, prepare for, and adapt to changing climate conditions while maintaining essential functions. This is a definition you probably see online. As the effects of climate change become more tangible and urgent, resilient design becomes crucial for establishing secure, healthy, sustainable communities. With this theme of climate resiliency, Rachel, what does climate resiliency mean to you?
Thank you for that definition. I like how it broke down the anticipation and preparing for, because I think so often it seems like it's reactionary. Like, you knew a hurricane was coming, you knew a fire, you didn't know a fire was coming, but there were things you could do ahead of time so that you could be prepared instead of it feeling like it's a reaction to a disaster after it happens. That is making me think about less so climate resiliency and more community resiliency. I think climate, if we want to think of it as like the earth and the land itself, is very resilient. It can bounce back. I'll just use all the traumatizing fires in LA that I've just lived through witnessing. There are all kinds of native plants and trees that need fire in order to propagate and reproduce and for their seeds to sprout. It's just one more ingredient, I think, to the land. And so it's the reaction of the people living on that land that needs to be more resilient. And I think that we've seen an amazing force of people coming together for good, to help each other, to create all of these mutual aid groups and GoFundMes, and really working together to pool resources and share and help each other out. That community resiliency is something that we need, especially moving forward, as we are frequently failed by our governments and those in power. And I really hope that this is a wake-up call and turning point for the average citizen to realize there's so much that we can do to be involved and create these networks and these groups to be more resilient together.
Beautiful. I love the aspect of community resiliency. My work before climate was centered around social innovation, social impact, and I worked with and experienced firsthand the power of what communities can do when they come together and support each other, utilize skills and resources that they have. So with this idea of climate resiliency, our challenge could center around how might designers design for an uncertain future? The thing that I talk a lot about in my presentations is that human beings have never experienced this climate breakdown ever. Yes, as you mentioned, the Earth is going to be here. It'll rebalance once things die down. But human beings have never really witnessed that ourselves. And so all of this is new to us. We don't have best practices. We don't have a playbook. We have really good ideas, and we can use some history that we've experienced in the past to anticipate and, again, prepare for. But that's not very certain, because the future is uncertain. So as designers, how can we design for an uncertain future? So with that in mind, let's jump into the Thinknado process. Step one of the Thinknado process is wait, why? This is when we start to question reality. This is the doom part of doom and bloom. This is where the status quo comes to surface and us figuring out how that fits into society. This is our chance to be a toddler and ask the question why all over again. So with that, Rachel, what does the current state of the world look like through the lens of climate resiliency, and how designers are not designing for an uncertain future?
The first thing that came to mind is something that I try to echo in a lot of our meetups, is this idea of collaboration over competition. At the very root, we need to start understanding and working that way. I think not feeling this like individualized ownership over ideas or designs is key. For myself, I've been really active with different design and comms teams for nonprofits. And the idea that I've been trying to use is keeping things very open source so that anybody could go in, make a change, especially with a very loose remote team. You don't know if your computer could get damaged in some sort of disaster and you physically can't go in and work on your files. So keep it open source so that anybody can pick up where you've left off. And that also speaks to the larger community resilience idea that you can't carry this entire burden by yourself, and knowing when to ask for help or share the weight with others is really important. If you're going to be doing work that helps all of the like on the ground grassroots people, recognizing that they don't have the bandwidth to even think about this stuff because they're just in survival mode. I know so many different organizations that are out there doing so much great work, but they're really lacking in communication, telling people about the work that they're doing is like such an afterthought, but you can't get more people and more funding and more support if you're not communicating what you're doing. So that's a really crucial role for designers to play. There's a group that just launched during the fires called Design for Disaster Response. And they're great. It's different creatives who've gone out, they've gone to the different resource hubs and rescue centers and talked to the people on the ground asking, what do you need help with? Is it help getting the word out? Is it help with physical signage to direct people about where they need to go? And just really what you learn in doing social impact work. You don't just show up and say, oh, you need this and this, and I'm going to design it for you. You really work with the people designing the things that they actually need. I think it really starts there with like our mindset and our approach to the work that needs to be done.
Okay, so if I can break that down, you threw a lot at me. To come back to the Thinknado prompt, wait, why? Wait, why are we still in competition with each other as opposed to being collaborative? Wait, why are we still gatekeeping our knowledge and our creativity? Wait, why are we still in survival mode? Wait, why are many people still in survival mode? Wait, why are we not being open about what is actually needed within communities?
Wait, why are we still praising rugged individuality? Wait, why do we still think we have all the answers instead of thinking about asking the people who are there what they actually need? Yeah, why do we think we have all the answers without first asking the questions?
That's a good one. There's so much to unpack in that around design imperialism. Designers, especially in the social impact space, you mentioned the idea of designing with, not for. Designers coming in saying, hey, I have all the answers, listen to me. That's designing for other people. You're not really inviting voices. You're not listening. You're just putting your own biases into the design work that you're doing. So the idea of designing with people, literally with them in the creative process, is key, especially when it comes to climate resiliency and this uncertain future. Because again, no one has all the right answers. We don't have the right answers. We're figuring this out as we go. We have some things that we can point to from our past. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be exactly the same or that's going to be right in the future, but at least we can use it as a starting point. But the more that we can come together as a community and invite shared experiences, knowledge, resources, wisdom, that's when we start to really come up with the ideas that need to be developed based on the people that we're actually working with. With that, let's move on to step 2. Maybe it's possible. This is all about exploring possibilities. The word maybe gives us the freedom to link unlikely outcomes. Maybe there's a better way. Maybe what we've been doing could be better, right? Taking the conversations that we've just been having, Rachel, about wait, why, and then the actual challenge, how might designers design for an uncertain future? Let's start to explore some possibilities. We're not getting into solutions just yet, but let's just explore possibilities of what could be.
Maybe it's possible to work collectively and evolve away from this idea of competition. Maybe it's possible to shift people's mindsets around how work looks. Now I'm getting into my favorite, how do we exist in a post-capitalist world? Maybe it's possible to exist in a post-capitalist world. Maybe it's possible to not live in flight or fight, always responding out of a panicked survival fear space. And maybe it's possible to live in abundance from the interconnectivity that we have as a community.
Maybe it's possible to teach design students the idea of designing with, not for, at the beginning of their schooling. So it's ingrained in them, not an afterthought. It is something that they just know as normal. A lot of how professional designers show up in the world is based on just how they were taught design. And so if we go upstream and focus on design education as part of this brainstorming session, how could we ingrain that idea in young designers so that it's default, it's the norm? Maybe
it's possible to change our metrics and ways of measuring success instead of it being who's made the most profit or how many of your designs made it to the final finished product? What if you measure how many people did this help? How many people shared the burden of creating this?
Maybe it's possible to celebrate design that has impact as opposed to celebrating design for aesthetics. And I know that there are organizations and communities that do celebrate design that has impact, but how do we really elevate that? How do we make that the norm? How do we make that the focus on these very well-known design blogs?
How do we have an award show that grants awards to impact?
They might exist, but how do we elevate them? How do we make them the mainstream?
The things that we might know in our very niche climate and design worlds are not something that the average person and or even family members that we talk to have ever heard about.
So with that, let's jump into the next step in the Thinknado process, the what if step. This is where we get into the actual Thinknado deck and randomly pull out 2 cards. I have the Thinknado deck in front of me, and I have random cards laid out, and we're going to use these cards in coming up with ideas for this next step. This helps us move past our biases to allow the most creative, outlandish, and wild ideas to come to life. And without doing this, we're just going to go into our existing filing cabinet of ideas and biases and just produce expected normal ideas. So the point of these cards is to help us break these synaptic connections within our creative process to come up with truly unique, innovative ideas. So with that, I have 2 random cards, Rachel, for you. One card is a word, and then the other card is an image. I'm going to present to you what I randomly pulled out.
Did you shuffle the deck?
I shuffled them. Yes, I did. And I'm going to present the pair to you, and you can either keep the 2 or you can swap out one of them, and then that's it. Okay. So here we go. The first card is a word, unlikely. And the second card is an image of a gargoyle.
Oh.
All right, so we have unlikely gargoyle. You can either keep this pair or you can swap out just one of them, and that's it.
Oh, man.
So before you make a decision, to give you a little bit more context, we can use these cards literally, or we can use them as inspiration. Totally up to you. So we can riff off of these, or we can actually take them and use them in the actual idea generation.
If I want to pick a different card, but then I go back to liking the first card better, could we do that?
No, it's either all or nothing.
Oh, man. Let's switch out that ugly little gargoyle.
Okay. All right. So we have unlikely peaches.
Oh, it's a hand picking peaches off of a tree.
There you go. Yep. All right. This is it.
Okay.
All right. So before we get into it, unlikely, let's break that down. Unlikely. What does that mean to you?
The first thing that pops up is within community resilience, you find unlikely partners and you find people that you might not necessarily think you'd naturally gravitate towards. But when you get to know them on a deeper level, you have the same goals and values and are aligned in wanting to protect your community or your neighborhood. I'm also thinking about how the environmental movement has the unlikely partnership of hunters in their work in doing like land and green space conservation. So that's why I chose to keep the word unlikely, because I think that's really important to break down your biases that you might have against people.
Love it. No, I think that's great. I'm gonna move forward. But yes, definitely something to think in mind when it comes to the next step, which is the what if step. So this is the creative engine part of Thinknado. This is the bloom part where we dream big. We come up with lots of different possibilities, right? Limitless possibilities. We're not so worried about the details and trying to figure out how to get it done. We want to start really wide here. And then in the next step, we'll break it down into small bets. But before we do that, step 3, it's all about what if. So with that, unlikely peaches, what are some ways that we can use these 2 cards and addressing our prompt. And again, how might designers design for an uncertain future? Considering everything that we've talked about so far, considering the challenge, how might designers design for an uncertain future with the pairing of unlikely peaches?
Unlikely harvesting of peaches.
Sure. There's a hand in the image reaching for a peach. So yes, harvesting peaches from a peach tree, if you want to get specific, sure.
It's funny that when you mentioned there's the hand of a human reaching for the peach in the peach tree, that also makes me think of the symbiotic reciprocal relationship between humans and their natural environment. You know, we are all part of nature and part of the earth. And it makes me think about how standard thinking is, oh, we've got to leave the plants alone so that they can, you know, flourish without human intervention. But particularly for our peach trees and a lot of cultivated plants, they actually need human interaction. Like that peach tree's branches could break if somebody wasn't harvesting that. So that made me start thinking about how can we, in addition to how do climates create design for an uncertain future, it also makes me think about how can we bring in this idea of responsibility and stewardship that also incorporated responsibility, stewardship, regeneration into all of the design work that people are creating.
How do we harvest all that knowledge? So what if there's a database of local knowledge? And just to underscore the local part of it, right? Like, as we all know, our climate breakdown is going to be affecting every city, town, region very differently. So what's happening in the Bay Area will look very different than London. It's going to look very different in Singapore. So how do we harvest local knowledge so that designers can learn and create better design work with that local knowledge in mind? So what if there's some sort of database out there that is addressing various aspects of everything, right? Where you have the local vegetation, you have production, you have local resources, you have a sense of the community, you know, various demographics, things like that. And so when you know your design is going to be implemented in various locations, you can design for that.
That also brings us back to the designing for versus designing with. And what if, in addition to all of the data points, there was also, here are human beings and organizations and grassroots collectives that are doing this work that are open to and want to work with designers. So instead of just gathering all this data, it's having, you know, collaborative sessions with people in the community coming up with these ideas together.
What if design associations, I'm not going to name any, but what if these acronymed associations, we all know many of them, instead of producing design-centric events for designers, what if they stop doing design events? And what if they produce events that are talking about what we're talking about, right? Where they're bringing in indigenous communities, they're bringing in people who are talking about everything not design, but the audience would be designers. I would love to see these design associations. Many of them have been around for decades, if not over 100 years. What would that look like? I would love to see that.
I think we skipped right over peaches and went straight into the harvesting and the collective work of gathering things that are abundant in order to share them and disperse them with the rest of their communities.
We might want to maybe spend a minute or two on naming and visualizing what this is. So how can peaches inspire that? So there's Georgia, the state of Georgia here in the US, their whole, I guess, identity is wrapped around peaches. There's, you know, mascots, right? Like, I don't know. I think there might be something interesting to use the idea of the peach as a way to visualize this idea. You know, maybe it's a part of the logo, maybe it's part of the name, but I don't know. I think there's something fun about peaches with big sunglasses as the mascot of this. If you want to really think wrong about the idea that we're coming up with.
Well, now when you're talking specifically about peaches, all I can think about is how they have such a thin skin.
Mm,
I mean, I think that they've tried to breed them to create thicker skins so that they're easier to transport all over the world. But, it's a lot more fragile than a banana. And that made me think about how we think we have something that's whole that will survive, but can be so easily damaged. There can be like a break in the skin, a break in the system. So then that was making me think of other ideas. What if there was some sort of a network for all designers so that it was open source? You could have help from people all over the world. If, there was a flood or a fire in your community and a lot of the designers lost their computers and lost all their files and hard drives. That's a break in the skin, a break in the system. How could they get help from other people within this network?
yeah.
Not just to rebuild physically, but to rebuild digitally.
Now we're talking about mutual aid, right? So is there mutual aid centered around design and designers?
Yeah.
You know, the skin idea, a thick skin peach. There's something fun about that. But yeah, I think you're hinting around mutual aid for designers because this is kind of a shameless plug here. But with climate designers, the organization, we're trying to underscore how important design and designers are to our climate emergency. So think of it as if there's a region that has been impacted by a man-made disaster, you're going to have folks in the creative industry not being creative because they have to survive in some way or another. So that means that we lose kind of a region or part of our network. It's like, it's the mycelium idea. When there's a tree that's dying in the forest, other trees use the mycelium network as a way to push nutrients towards that one tree so it can survive, that it can become healthy again. So what does that look like with this design mutual aid idea using this harvesting and dispersing of information? We're kind of getting all over, we're going all over the place here, but I'm wondering if we can maybe bring something down to earth so that we can move on to the last step here. Try this.
Okay, well, real quick, let me just talk about a few of the organizations in LA that I've seen after the fires that have been doing this. They've been providing
Sure.
mutual aid specifically for artists, whether it's grant money or open maker spaces so that people can rebuild, free pottery classes, like all kinds of stuff. Oh, and then free recovery of your files if like your hard drive was damaged. Instead of spending like $1,000 to recover files off of broken equipment, they're doing it for free. And that is huge. But yeah, so how do all of these things continue? How can we work together instead of in competition with each other during times of non-emergencies?
Let's move on to our final step in the Thinknado process. This is something called try this. This is all about taking action through the lens of small bets. How do we break some of these big ideas that we've been talking about into something that we can actually get going? So we want to break them down into small bets because it allows us to test out these ideas. It allows us to prototype and put it in front of people to get feedback based on these prototypes. And, of course, if you're listening to this and you actually want to move forward with some of these ideas, you want to do your research to ensure what you're actually trying is the better option. We're just coming up with these crazy ideas. Of course, we would want to spend some time researching before we move any pixel, right? That's an important step as designers. But because this is just a fun brainstorming session, so how do we bring some of these ideas down to earth? What would be the first thing that we would want to do to think about testing out this harvesting of knowledge, building out this kind of database, addressing how designers can learn from non-designers and then implement it in their work. One thought I had would be, I mentioned some of these acronym design associations. Could climate designers partner up with one of them and put a series on where we talk about non-design stuff And could that series, maybe we focus on one region, maybe it's the Bay Area, maybe it's LA County, maybe it's the New York area, just something to start with. And could we partner up with them for a handful of events? Maybe it's 6 months of events, maybe it's once a month. And we can utilize our networks to help produce these events that then could be shared amongst these associations members. It's providing a place for people to learn about what's going on in their region. And then because it's coming from design organizations like climate designers and whatever organization we're partnering up with, we can work with those speakers to help translate those ideas into action so that if you're a fashion designer, a UX UI designer in the audience, you can then figure out how to implement what you just learned from those speakers in your work.
I like that. I think that that's something that's really important is for people to get out of their silos, like I just do this one very specific thing and that's all I know. And there's a lot of overlap between different organizations that would be really helpful, like, yeah, let's get a group of designers and biologists and farmers and chefs and sanitation workers. Like, let's get everybody together that has some sort of touch point along the entire life cycle of whatever. Let's say that you are a designer working on packaging for a cool new upcycled food product. And so you talk to the farmer that grew the produce, you talk to the supply chain managers, the people who think that, that apple's too ugly to sell in a store. And then at the other end of it, like the sanitation workers, like, oh, I came up with this great idea for this packaging and I think that it's completely recyclable or compostable. And then you learn like, oh, actually, no, that we don't compost that in this neighborhood or city or whatever. And yeah, just kind of putting together this oversight committee.
Yeah. And I think we can have different tracks, right? You just listed out packaging design or food-based packaging design, right? So that's one track. Another track could be centered around fashion. Another track could be centered around industrial design. Let's bring these non-designers into the conversation to bring in some visual branding elements to it. You talked about thick skin. There's something fun about the idea of if we were to actually visualize this, I still like the idea of a peach being the mascot, but it's a thick-skinned peach. How do you visualize that? I don't know. But I'm now starting to think, what's the name? What's the one-line description? Rachel, you say this often in our conversations. There's a lot of great organizations out there doing great work. There's no reason why we need new organizations. Let's tap into that. Let's harvest their knowledge as designers to then figure out how it can show up in our work. Tapping into what is happening in our own communities, learning about them, and then implementing what we learn in the work that we're doing so that we are designing for a future that will be uncertain, yes, but that we are also designing with the most appropriate knowledge and information on hand. It's a really interesting idea. I would love to move forward with this.
Well, what I was thinking about right now is how we have all these different like conferences coming up. We've got LA Climate Week, SF Climate Week, we've got Bioneers, all these different climate conferences that happen. And somehow it still doesn't feel like everybody's gathering the same information. So what if there was, kind of like the same as like a traveling job fair or festival, like a festival of holistic knowledge where gathering in this one space that's open for everybody, I guess, under the idea of repair. How do you repair your neighborhood? How do you repair your city? Maybe there's some booths that are like repair cafes where people can just hang out and mend things that are broken and gain knowledge from people who know how to fix things, whether it's sewing and fixing textiles or I saw that at one of the libraries, they have retired like NASA JPL engineers that take apart your broken electronics and put them back together. And then on the other side, it's repairing the land and the soil. And you've got different composting and native plant rehabilitation groups. And they're talking about how they repair and heal in a very different way. And then you've got the designers who talk about how they are repairing either real world spaces, whether they're urban planners, landscape designers. How are you using different materials or different concepts of what the city's future looks like? Or if you're a UX UI designer and you're digital, how are you changing our behaviors through the interactions that we have with our technology? I mean, we have LA Climate Week that's coming up in April. I mean, I think SF and New York are also having their climate weeks in April. So this could perhaps be a traveling workshop. But I think I really liked the idea of branching out. That kind of also ties back to the harvesting the peach off the tree, branching out past your typical topics and areas of expertise, and having these workshops that bring in a lot of designers and have experts from different organizations, whether it's sanitation at the end of life or harvesting and materials at the beginning of life, and getting everybody together to really share localized knowledge to the designers in that community. April's not that far off. There will still be a lot of work to be done healing from all of the fires in LA. It'll be a slow process. That could be really interesting for creatives to figure out what roles they can play in community resilience and healing from these disasters.
Love it. This is great. I love how you tied it into an upcoming climate week happening in LA. And it's only a few months away. I mean, the small bet could just be one event, a topic, and then promote it within the LA design community. And then we can take lessons learned, apply it to following climate weeks happening around the country. This is great. Well, as we wrap up, Rachel, is there anything else you want to share with the audience that we didn't cover today?
I think my main takeaway from all of this goes back more to the unlikely card, and really having to get rid of this idea of othering, of competition, and fully embrace this idea of working together across silos, branching out, getting out of your comfort zone, getting to know different people around your immediate neighborhood, and really working together. We have to do what we can with the power that we have.
Awesome. Well, thanks for taking the time. I appreciate it. And looking forward to our next jam session.
Thanks.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of Doom and Bloom. A big thank you to the incredible team behind the podcast, Camille Graham, Jacqueline Demchek, Holden Hardcastle, and our music producer, Albert Paul. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and leave a comment, and definitely share it with someone who can use a little bloom in their life. Follow us on Instagram at climatedesignersorg, and don't forget to tag us in your projects. We'd love to see how our episodes inspire you. You can also email us at hello@climatedesigners.org to share how you're turning inspiration into action. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.